Missed an episode of your favorite podcast? Choose from over a decade of content in our archives, not just the latest episode. All free at GCNlive.com.
This is your call to action. Get prepared, America. Economy, survival, energy, disasters. This is USAPrepares.com. Informative radio, educational radio. Interact now by emailing instructor@usaprepares.com or text at 434-390-7953. Class, please take your seats. Now, your instructor, Vincent Finelli.
Yeah. Everyone all set? Cocked? Locked? Here we go. Your dial is set correctly to USA Prepares. If you would like to call in, we'll pay for the call. 866-582-9933. 866-582-9933. Telephone listen line if you choose to listen 24/7. It's kind of like an endless loop that gets replaced every day. It gets replaced when we go live. 605-477-3249. 605-477-3249. Now, years ago, I didn't understand that there would be really a demand to listen to the radio from a cell phone. I didn't understand that. It seemed like, well, why would anybody do that? Well, they do it because they have their cell phones with them most of the time, if not all the time. And some choose to listen to USA Prepares. So we have this telephone listen line. And I found out years ago that USA Prepares has among the highest minutes of listen to radio on the network. Can you imagine that? So we have some very loyal students. And those with cell phones seem to, or home phones, speakerphones, just dial the number if they have unlimited long distance. And they dial 605-477-3249 and listen to us 24 hours a day if they choose. I want to thank you very much for doing that. And that's why we do this. If no one is paying attention, there's no reason for us to be here. And that was one of the things I wanted to ask the class. On Fridays, second hour, I've been doing a class, just me, on preparedness. Things that I've written down in spiral-bound notebooks, things, the way I do things. And if you think that that's worth doing, I'd love to hear from you. You can call anytime you want. Just let me know if you think that, if you enjoy learning about things that you might not have thought about or done before. And that's what I've written down in these numerous spiral-bound notebooks. So if that's of interest and you want me to continue that, I'd love to know if that's of interest. So you can call anytime, and that number would be, well, as long as we're on the air, right? And that number is 866-582-9933. This Friday, I'll be doing it again, second hour. First hour is with Dr. Margaret in Spain. And the second hour will be just me, talking about preparedness, USA Prepares type classes. I'm delighted to be broadcasting with our international correspondent in Australia, Guineith Isaacs. Welcome, Guineith.
Hello, Vincent. How are you this morning?
I am really well. Guineith, I'm so excited. I can see the light at the end of the tunnel. So for 6 or 8 weeks now, I've been spackling wallboard to finish a bedroom because we have had, for the last 15 years, this bedroom has not been finished. And when I say not been finished, I mean the wallboard is up, but you could see the blown-in fiberglass insulation in the, I don't know, over 100 holes in the wall that we drilled, 3-inch holes, and blew in fiberglass insulation on top of the closed cell foam. And so now it's almost, I can probably finish it this afternoon, and then we can and what we do with spackle to finish it, we don't sand it. What we do is we take a washcloth, a rough washcloth, put it in warm water, and wipe it over the spackle. And it smooths it out really, really nicely. And then we can prime it and paint it. So after 15 years, we'll have a bedroom that's finished. and then on to the next room. So there's only a few more rooms that I need to work on, but it's been taking forever. And, if I didn't do radio, it would have been done already. So anyway, getting close to being finished. And I guess you have the same kind of, I wouldn't say distraction, but same kind of allocation of time that you could be doing other things that you're dedicating to radio. Isn't that right?
Well, if I wasn't on the radio, I'd be sleeping.
Yeah. But if
usually when I do USA Prepares, it completely wipes me out for most of Thursday. And
that's what I mean.
After I do the broadcast, I usually sleep until about 10 a.m. or midday on Thursday, and thankfully I don't work away from home, and so I can sort of take my time and work my own hours with the jobs that I need to do. But I think I mentioned in the email, this sort of does lead into where we want to go today with the topic. I want to talk about epigenetics today. Okay? I found, I listen to USA Prepares most days. I do listen to USA Prepares on my cell phone, but how I do it is the cell phone's almost useless around here. I'm talking on it at the moment, but I'm talking on it sitting in a corner of my house next to a window facing in a particular angle that I'm guessing is probably facing towards a cell tower, which is about 60 kilometres away. But because there's enough of a line of sight, then we get a signal. But most other places, except for right at the top of the land where we've got our little campsite on the hill, the cell phone doesn't work, but it works as an MP3 player. So I download the show on my computer, and then I transfer it with a USB plug to my phone. And then as I'm doing my farm work and other work during the day, I carry my phone with me, which the signal doesn't work. But I listen to the show on my phone, using my phone as an MP3 player. So it's very interesting that you said that. That's another way. I don't know how many people listen to the show that way. But yeah, it's. So I want to talk today about epigenetics, and I think I wrote in the email, but I don't know how clear I was on that. So I'll just talk with with the train of thought that I've been developing. And Dr. Shealy was talking on Monday. I love Dr. Shealy, by the way. I think that he's absolutely great, and I'm very honoured. But I think I can count him as my friend. What do you think about that, Vincent?
Absolutely, and I can tell you that if you placed a call to Dr. Shealy, you would have him on the other end of that call. Absolutely.
Wow.
I'm serious. Let me give you an example. Last night I sent him an email. I talked with Sonny Skidmore, who owns a radio station, KLID, in Poplar Bluff, Missouri. And she was in a car accident, and as a result of that car accident, she had both of her legs amputated above the knee. And so she was in intensive care at the hospital for a couple of days. She still is. And I called her again last night. And we talked about Dr. Shealy. And I said, would you like to talk to Dr. Shealy? And she said she'd love to talk to Dr. Shealy. So she would carry our broadcast and place us on prime time in the afternoons, drive time, the best time slot they had on that radio station. She would put USA Prepares on. And we did not pay her for that. She just thought that what we did was worth doing, and she did it for free. By the way, most broadcasts are paid for by the broadcaster. The big names that other than maybe Rush Limbaugh, those broadcasters pay to be on, AM and FM radio stations. For the most part, we don't do that. And so she liked us so much that she gave us the best time slot without charging us for it. And she would listen to Dr. Sheely. She had a pickup truck, and she was running errands, visiting clients, and so forth. She's 90 years old, by the way. She would work her schedule around USA Prepares so she could listen to us. And if Dr. Sheely were on, she would just park the truck in some spot and listen rather than go on errands. So she was very tuned in to Dr. Sheely, and so I sent Dr. Sheely an email, and I said, Sonny Skidmore would love to chat with you, and I let him know that she'll be calling. So I'm certain, absolutely certain, he would take the call. Absolutely.
Yeah.
Well, that's Dr. Sheely. And
sorry.
What I was trying to say is that we have a number of instructors who do this because they feel a calling to do this. They just want to share their information. So here we have a medical doctor who carves out 2 hours every Monday out of his schedule to be on the air with us. He could be seeing patients, but instead he's on the air with us. So thank you very much, Dr. Sheely. And he's a very dear friend. He really is, and I'm not exaggerating.
Well, what I was going to say is he said something really, really interesting that got my attention on Monday. And that was when he was talking, actually, I think it was you that brought the topic up about phantom limb and amputation, okay? And about how if you have an amputated foot or an amputated toe and you get an itch in the toe, you want to scratch it and you can't because you haven't got a physical foot anymore, and you've still got all of the feeling of the foot. Now, this shows something that I have known is the case. I've heard of this before, by the way. Of what our true forms really are, okay? We are all ghosts, spirits walking around in physical bodies, okay? And that is our true form. Our true form is that we are spiritual beings. And this flesh that we wear is like our earth suit. We have to put it on. We have to come into an incarnation on this earth because we've got work to do here, okay? And, if something happens to us before our job is done and our earth suit becomes unusable, then we have to cast it off. And then we go we go to heaven, or we go into some ethereal realm of spirits. And we can, from there, I believe that we can go back to God and that we can ask to be reincarnated again and that we can come back to the earth again. And this has implications for us, and it does have to do with epigenetics. I think I can hear some music, Vincent. Or have I got a few more moments to talk?
Yes, sir. Yes. Yes, you do. We're going into a break. Guineith and I will be right back. Guineith is live in Australia. Guineith Isaacs is with us. We're talking about phantom limbs. And once a part of the body's been cut off and it feels itchy, you can't scratch it because there's no place to scratch it. So if your foot has been removed, you cannot scratch your foot. But you may still have the feeling that you need to scratch that foot. Please continue, Guineith.
Okay. Now, the thing is, the reason why that phenomenon exists, I'm not a medical doctor, but I am a psychic. And that's because you are a ghost, and I'm a ghost, and everybody's ghost. We're all ghosts walking around in physical bodies, and when your physical foot gets amputated, your ghost foot is still there most of the time. Sometimes, the ghost foot gets detached as well, But most of the time, the ghost foot is still there, attached to the rest of your ethereal form. And that's why you have the, itch on your foot and you can't scratch it, because it's, it's not a physical foot. It doesn't have the physical foot attached anymore, but your ghost foot is still attached. And actually, this can be photographed. If you get somebody who's an amputee, many times if you photograph them using Carillion photography, then you will still see their missing limb attached to their body in the ghost form. And, it's a really, really, it's not the way that we have taught to think about ourselves as people. But if you look at the world in that way, suddenly a whole bunch of things start to make sense, okay? It's not just us, it's also animals, kangaroos, wallabies. I have seen, when driving around, ghost kangaroos in the forest, when I have a car, jump in front of my car, and then my car passes straight through them because they're a ghost. And I don't quite know why it is that ghosts get attached to particular places. But I think that it probably does have to do with the energy patterns that we form, because, the way that we dress each day begins to form a part of our energy field, a part of a sense of who we are. But this is all a little bit of a sidetrack to what I'm really getting at here, which is that imprint, that ghost of who we are, stays the same across all of our lifetimes. If we reincarnate, we come back looking more or less the same, with a few minor differences, as our previous incarnation. And we look the same. We have, if you have somebody who has died a traumatic death or a violent death in a past life, often they will have a birthmark on their physical body which shows the past life death wound. Now, with myself, in my previous lifetime, I was Lady Catherine Ferrers, and I think I sent a photo to you earlier, a photo of myself and then a painting of Lady Catherine Ferrers. And I want for you to show your opinion. Do I look like Lady Catherine Ferrers? If I don't, then feel quite free to, disagree with me there. But personally, I think I look a lot like her.
Yeah. And I saw the photograph that you sent me.
Yeah. And I look just about exactly like her. But more than that, I sent a photo of this to you as well, and I've also posted it on my Facebook page. If people want to go and have a look in the photo section of my Facebook page, it's posted there. I posted a photo of my back, and you can see what looks like a gunshot wound on my back. And it's a birthmark on my back that looks like a gunshot wound. Actually, a bullet wound, not a gunshot wound.
Hold that thought. For those of you who were still with us during that bottom of the hour commercial announcement, there was the sound of vehicles going down the road, engines roaring, and then you hear the sound of texting, using a smartphone while driving. Then you hear a crash. Then you hear the hospital sounds of the monitors. Then you hear the flat line. And you heard something akin to, do us a favor, keep your eyes on the road. I just have a quick comment about that. It's infuriating to me when people are so careless that they will not pay attention to the piloting of their motorized missile, which can be 2,000, 3,000, 4,000 pounds or more. And they don't care about you. They only care about themselves, the me first, the greed factor, where they are driving intentionally distracted. They are putting themselves into a mode of distraction. And it just reminds me that I got a phone call from our son, and he was in Springfield, Missouri. And he was stopped at a traffic light behind another guy who was stopped at a traffic light, behind another guy who was stopped at a traffic light. He was driving a large Dodge truck, 6 inches jacked up from the factory. 3/4-ton trucks are jacked up at the factory, 6 inches, for clearance purposes. It's not something that he did. It just came like that. It's manufactured that way. Loud diesel engine from the factory. Cummins diesels are known for being really loud compared to Ford and Chevy diesels. So it's a white truck. It's jacked up. It's loud. You can't ask for much more than that to be seen, right? And this guy just drives right to the back of him while he's stopped at a traffic light, a red light. Everyone else was stopped in front of our son. And so when our son called and he said, "Hey, Dad, I was in an accident." So what happened? He said, "Well, I was stopped at a light, and a guy just drove right to the back of my truck." First question, "Are you okay?" "Yeah, I'm fine, Dad." "Is he okay?" That was my second question. "Yeah, I think he's okay. He totaled his van, but I think he's okay." Third question, "Did you beat him up?" And I wasn't kidding.
Oh, my gosh.
How do you drive into the back, in the city? How do you drive into the back of a stopped vehicle? There's 3 red lights on the back of the truck when you stop. One is above the cab, in the top of the center, above the cab, at the highest point of the roof line. And then there's a right and left stoplight on the back of the bed box. 3 lights. They're all red. They're all bright. And this guy drives right into the back. And it wasn't raining. It wasn't dark. It was just normal daytime. Bang. And I was livid. Absolutely livid. Guy did several $1,000s worth of damage to the truck. And what would the guy say? "Oh, my wife's going to kill me because he just totaled her van." So that's driving distracted. It's unacceptable. And that was one comment. Another comment I wanted to make was, as a Catholic, I was taught the following: in the name of the Father and the Son and the Holy Ghost. That's the Trinitarian formula. Sometimes it's in the name of the Father and of the Son and of the Holy Spirit. So Holy Spirit is equivalent to Holy Ghost. And you were talking about ghosts. And some people might think, is she for real? Well, that's Catholic doctrine, that there is a Holy Ghost. Yeah.
And we are made in the image of God. So God made us in the beginning. He formed us out of the dust of the earth, and then he breathed his spirit into us. So each one of us, when I talk about that each one of us is a ghost walking around in a physical body, that physical body is basically made of clay, and I've never heard any medical doctor dispute that. Just clay in another form, because what happens is you get herbs and vegetables and animals and fruit grow, the vegetables and the fruit and the roots grow out of the soil. The animals eat them, and we eat the vegetables, the herbs, the fruit, and the animals, and they all ultimately come from the soil. They come from the clay. But the spark that gives us life, that is the Holy Spirit of God, which is our spirit being. That is the ghost that I'm talking about. So we're like little parcels of God parcels of Holy Spirit all sort of put into physical bodies and walking around on this earth. We are spirit beings. And then when we die, our ghosts leave our bodies and return to that ethereal world. And maybe they hang around a place for a while. Maybe they go straight back to heaven. But I watched my husband die. He had a heart attack right next to me. And there was nothing that I could do. But he had a premonition that he was going to die. And he prepared me for that beforehand. And he told me what manner of burial he would like and such like. And he was very comfortable with the fact of his own death. He was a Christian, and he believed that Jesus died for his sins on the cross, and that he loved Jesus. And he had two sayings that he was really, really famous for, that he said often enough that, you know how you get somebody says a saying so often that they become known for that saying? Well, his were, he had two of them. One of them was, I am the teetotaling pirate king. And the other one was, Jesus loves you. And those were the two sayings that he was most noted for. And I think that if he was here, he would rather that people remember him for saying Jesus loves you than for saying I am the teetotaling pirate king. But he would say both of them maybe several times a day. And the thing is that, you know, he was back in the day the teetotaling pirate king, and he was also the lover of Catherine Ferrers, and I was with him in both of those lives. In his lover of Catherine Ferrers life, of course, I was Catherine Ferrers, and in his teetotaling pirate king life, I was George Wilson, who was Robert's lover. But the thing is, getting back to it, those previous incarnations help to form who we are in this current existence. And we can draw on the experiences that we have from those past lives. If we're aware of those lives and conscious of them, we can draw on the lessons that have learned from those previous incarnations and use them in our present lifetime, okay? And there's also weaknesses as well. Like, for instance, I mentioned earlier that usually after a broadcast I have to sleep until, you know, maybe 10, 11 or 12 in the morning, you know, or midday following a broadcast. And that is because with my liver, it's not just the surface gunshot wound that I have in my back. I have liver scars on the inside of me, and these were medically diagnosed. I became extremely ill a number of years ago, and I went to the doctor, and he said, well, you've got non-alcoholic fatty liver disorder. And I said, what is that? And he said, you've got scars on your liver. And he said these scars are normally they're the type of scars that you get with somebody who weighs 300 kilograms and can hardly walk. And that's what my doctor said. And I said, you're kidding. He said, no, have you ever been a heavy drinker or a heavy drug user? And I said, no. I've never been an alcoholic. I've never been a drug addict. And he said, this is the extent of liver scarring that you have. Okay? So, you know, that's difficult to account for. The only thing I possibly think in this life that could have led to it, and this is what I'd love to ask Dr. Shealy, I did have glandular fever when I was in my early 20s. So I don't think that it would cause this magnitude of liver scarring that I have. And mostly I lead a healthy and active life, and mostly I keep myself, I have to be very careful, but I have to monitor my energy level, and I have to eat healthy. If I don't eat healthy, I become extremely ill. Does that make sense, Vincent?
Yeah, and I'm trying to figure out the best way to have you on the air with Dr. Shealy. Maybe, if you'd like, next Monday we can arrange that. Is that something you'd like to do?
Yeah, I would love that, particularly to discuss the effects of past life injury on your present incarnation, because I know that that's a topic that he's interested in as well. Mm-hmm. You know, and it's really good that he is, because, and I know that he's got his past life work that he works on too, with Dr. Elliotson. And, you know, this is an area that is very, very interesting for me. And so normally, after a broadcast, it's the funniest thing, because normally after a broadcast, I'm wide awake. There's been a few times I've fallen asleep on air, but not often. Normally, I'm still awake at 4 a.m. locally after a broadcast because I'm wide awake, and I'm still thinking of, you know, 50 different things that I could have said on air, and, you know, this is it. But then I sleep until, like I say, sometimes even midday the following day. And when I wake up, I'm extremely sluggish, and I just, I really don't do much at all on Thursdays, you know. I might go on the internet for a bit and watch some videos, and I might sort of potter around in the garden, but I don't like to do any heavy work, because if I'm tempted to do any heavy work on Thursday, then I'm knocked out for Friday as well. Mm-hmm. And I know that I've got to watch those energy levels.
We'll be right back.
Does that make sense, Vincent?
Yeah, it does. And I've got a follow-up question when we come back. I do something very similar to what you've mentioned, and that is day and night, literally day and night. I think about things that I'll bring up, mention in the next broadcast. And it just happens. I don't try to consciously think of, you know, what are we going to talk about tomorrow? It just happens. And is that what you're talking about before a broadcast? You've got lots of thoughts in your mind about things that you're going to share. Is that what you were saying?
Yeah. I'm never short of anything to say.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And, you know, it's really, really interesting, because this has been things that I've sometimes been thinking about for 20 and 30 years. Mm-hmm. And to finally have an audience to say them to, you know, is really, really quite good. It's actually quite fulfilling for me. And but with this topic of epigenetics, oh my gosh, I'm really actually quite relieved that it's getting the attention now in the scientific and medical community that it is getting. And I think I mentioned before on the broadcast, there's a video game out there called Assassin's Creed, okay? And the storyline in this video game is that here is a fellow, and it's kind of ambiguous whether he's reincarnated. Actually, I think it's probably both, that he is the reincarnation for multiple generations in the past of being an assassin all the way back to the Crusade, and also that these people were his ancestors. This is the main character in the video game, and that he gets captured by a secret government laboratory and he's held prisoner, and he's put into a device that induces a hypnotic state, and he goes back to these past lives, and he does missions, and he's used by his jail guards to go and find out things, and also to go and kill people in the game, in the video game. And I'm looking at this and I'm thinking, this is remarkable. I'm sure that this sort of laboratory actually exists, and that the government is actually doing this with particular people who have interesting pre-incarnations and interesting genetic histories. You know, like, for instance, if somebody has been for multiple lifetimes a Knights Templar or an assassin, or somebody who has been, I don't know, a rebel or something like that, or just a very, very efficient soldier, you know, I'm sure that the government must have laboratories like they have in the Assassin's Creed video game. And if there's one video, I'm not normally one for playing any video game other than Microsoft Solitaire. I do rather like Microsoft Solitaire on my computer. It's just sort of, it's something I just go and play a few hands of cards to go on the computer to sort of relax sometimes. But other than that, I'm not into playing video games. But if there is one video game that I would like to play, it would be Assassin's Creed, just for the simple thing of seeing what they are telling people through this computer game. Now, I know that you probably have not had anything to do with Assassin's Creed, the video game, but I was wondering if you'd heard anything about any government laboratories where they go in and put people into hypnotic states and have them going back and exploring either their ancestry or their previous incarnation. And the idea, incidentally, the idea of epigenetics, they don't call it epigenetics in the game, but it's very, very strongly woven into the whole theme of the game, Vincent.
I don't play video games. I have never played video games. And as far as looking at past lives, I think that would be a great discussion when you're on with Dr. Shealy, if we can make that happen on Monday. Yeah,
I would love to do that. In the meantime, I'll keep talking about how we can use our knowledge of our past lives and what benefit it is to us to do a bit of self-knowledge work. Okay, I can hear the music again, I think.
I had a quick question before we... I have a quick question before we go into the top of the hour break. Have you ever heard of the School of the Americas?
I have, but you'll have to refresh my memory on it after the break.
Yeah, okay. I'll mention that. The School of the Americas. Famous graduates. We'll be right back with Guineith Isaacs here on USA Prepares. Hour number 2 of USA Prepares. I mentioned the School of the Americas. Sounds like it's a quite prestigious school. One that many have never heard about. I know one of the graduates. School of the Americas is a U.S. Army school for assassins.
Wow.
I'm not kidding. So, class, here's your homework, should you choose to accept it. Just look up School of the Americas and see if I'm telling you the truth. It's a school for assassins. And it has some pretty famous graduates. One of them happens to be Manuel Noriega.
Wow.
So, yeah. It's something that most people don't know anything about. So anyway, it's really interesting.
Yeah.
Many years ago, I was with a friend, and we were getting to know each other. And I said, "Come on in the house. I want to show you a video." So I showed him this video of this uprising and in El Salvador. And so the video opens up with the entryway from the road to the School of the Americas. And there was no sign that said School of the Americas. It was just this.
Vincent.
Yes.
We're getting stingrayed again. I'm going to have to go and get my cord.
Okay.
Okay, you keep talking. I'll be back in a second.
Sure.
Okay?
Perfect timing, right?
Isn't it amazing how this happens when we get onto this topic?
Yeah. Yep. So
that's amazing. I'll be back in a second.
Sure. He happened to see on the video the entryway to the School of the Americas. And he said, "Oh, yeah, that's the School of the Americas." I said, "Wow. How'd you know that?" That part of the story I don't want to tell. But, yeah, there is a School of the Americas. And he told me that, Manuel Noriega is one of the graduates. So you can look it up, School of the Americas. And the name's been changed. Now it's called the Western Hemisphere Institute for Security Cooperation. The Western Hemisphere Institute for Security Cooperation. And there's an acronym for that. You know, the government has all kinds of acronyms. It's called WHINSEC. WHINSEC. Western Hemisphere Institute for Security Operations. Okay, so on Friday, hour number 2, I'm going to be talking about some of the things that I've written for topics in a book. I don't expect it's going to be published. It might be. I'm not trying to sell anything. I don't have anything to sell. I may or may not publish it. I don't even know if anybody's interested in the kinds of things that I've written down. You know, things like if you're going to build a new house, how to design your kitchen, how to do things that I don't know anyone who's ever done the kind of things that we've done. Really simple things. How to get more miles per gallon. I mean, I can tell you how to get 1 or 2 more miles per gallon in 5 minutes at a cost of $2, maybe $1. I'll tell you how to do it. And that should come up on Friday. And if you've got thoughts about how you do things, if you've got better ways, I'm all ears. I'd love to hear them. And if you like the kind of broadcast the USA Prepares, tips and tricks and the way the Finelli family does things and the way we live and the way we approach things, if you like to hear that, let me know somehow. You can call up anytime on USA Prepares and just say, "Hey, I'd like more." Or if you don't, you can say, "I'd like less." And we'll consider your thoughts and opinions. Guineith, you're back, I see.
I'm back here now.
Yeah.
And I should have gotten it at the top of the hour break, but I sort of looked at my phone and I said, "Oh, shoot." And it was actually showing the battery low light, which means that you've got maybe a couple of minutes left. But we're all good to go now. We've got our battery packed.
I've got a question. I've got a question.
Kind of how that sort of thing always happens when we get onto this sort of topic.
Oh, yeah, that's something that hardly anybody. I've never heard anybody on radio talk about that, the School of the Americas. But I have a question for you, and I wanted to ask you. So if in Australia the grid went down, now you live in a mud brick farmhouse, you are off the grid, you generate your own electricity with solar panels. If the grid went down in Australia, how long would it take you to find out, typically?
Maybe a few days. But I think the most telling thing would be, the thing that would be the big red flag for me, is we would lose our internet. That's the thing that would really make me go, uh-oh, something's going on here.
Right.
But, and I would know that something had happened, but as regards to what had happened, it might take me a few days to a week to find out, especially if we lost cell phone signal. Mm-hmm. Then I would have to think to myself, well, okay, I've better do an expedition into town just to see what's going on. And when I say expedition, I mean expedition because we don't have a car and we live 20 kilometres from the nearest small rural country town with 900 people living in it. So that's an expedition. That's either a really, really good day's hike for the likes of me, or that's a really good bike ride. Mm-hmm. And, yeah. It might be a couple of days before I would know what had happened.
Okay. Mm-hmm. Well, let me say something that kind of dovetails with this, and this bothers me. In the United States, in the state of California, the officials, according to a website called offgridsurvival.com, headline, quote, California officials declare ham radio no longer a benefit. Demands ham radio repeater infrastructure to be removed, end quote. Let me say that one more time. Quote, California officials declare ham radio no longer a benefit. Demands ham radio repeater infrastructure to be removed, end quote. It goes on to say, and this is October 10th, 2019, California is telling ham radio operators that they will no longer, the state, which is paid for by taxpayers, the state will no longer allow ham radio operators to operate repeaters on public land without paying substantial rental fees. Now, it used to be that the state would allow a tower to be put up by ham radio operators. And, of course, the ham radio operators would pay for the tower, they'd pay for the equipment, and they would pay for the electricity for it. So it didn't cost the state of California anything. It's just that they allowed the hams to have this tower and the equipment. So what's a ham radio repeater? It's a system of two-way radio communications that takes weak signals, low-level amateur radio signals, and transmits them at a higher power so that the signal can cover a longer distance without degradation. So, for example, let's say there are three people that want to communicate, but, two people that want to communicate, but they're too far for the radio reception to reach because of the curvature of the earth. So a tower is put up, and the tower just repeats the signal that the person who keys the mic sends out, and it gets sent out again over higher power so that the person at distance can receive that repeated message in real time. Well, California wants to stop that. Now, the ham radio operators are really the last line of defense in communications. The last line. Now, of course, those repeaters need electricity, but they also have battery banks to support and ride out, small interruptions. And maybe some of these hams have put generators in there to operate, longer. But ham radio is something that I consider pretty important. So in the case of the grid goes down and Guineith hopping on a horse to ride into town to figure out what's going on, that's going to get her, 10 miles away from her farm to a little village of 600 people. Now, in that village, they may be all scratching their heads at the same time saying, I don't know, Guineith, I'm glad to see you, but I was hoping you'd tell us what was going on. That could happen, right? Because they're in this village. Right. So now we have a situation where everybody's looking at everybody saying, I don't know, what do you think? I don't know, what do you think? I don't know, what do you think? I don't know.
Yeah.
That could happen.
I'll
Now,
tell
with
you
the
what
ham
would
radio,
probably happen in that situation, okay? Probably somebody would get in their car using what fuel they have and would drive into Bendigo, which is about 50 miles from the little country town down the road. And they almost for sure, Bendigo is a town of about 120,000 people, and almost for sure somebody in Bendigo would know what had happened. But Bendigo might be in a little bit of a situation of its own. Bendigo might not be a very safe place to be in that sort of situation. Does that make sense, Vincent?
It absolutely does. So the whole situation could be resolved very efficiently, maybe not very quickly, but, within maybe an hour or so. A ham radio operator could, if the rig is already set up and there's an antenna that's already set up, key that microphone, announce the call sign, and say, well, it looks like it's lights out over where I am, in Missouri. What do you all think? Anybody out there? Anybody got any comments? Key the mic a few times, and I'm sure within an hour you get something. Because, for example, my ham rig, which is an antique, it's solid state, but it's still an antique, is 12 volt and 120 volt powered. And most ham rigs can do that. And that is an infrastructure that's a private infrastructure. It's not dependent on the government in any way, shape, or form to communicate all over the world. I mean, my rig's only 100 watts, but it'll communicate all over the world under the right conditions. I can certainly get all over at least half the United States easily. We'll be right back. So, class, under the right conditions, you can bounce signals off the ionosphere and communicate pretty far with ham radio rigs. And I think it's important that you consider learning more about ham radio. And if you think we should have some more classes on it, I can bring some pretty famous authors on who teach these classes and have written books. And so if you're interested, we can make that happen. But, really, the truth being known, in an emergency, if you have access to a ham radio rig, you do not need a ham ticket in order or license in order to use it. An emergency is an emergency. And even the government will say, yeah, it's an emergency, so you don't need to have a ticket or a license to broadcast. You can't broadcast, transmit on ham radio. But in my opinion, you should get the license. Not for the license per se, but for the knowledge that you will learn and gain from studying for the license. Okay? So I agonized over that. Did I really want to get a license and be registered with the other team? And I decided I would. So I have a ham radio license, and I can use my rig. But the main reason was because I wanted that information. And literally, some people study for weeks or months to get that information understood. I didn't do that. I just sat down for one day on a weekend, and I read the book cover to cover, and I used a yellow highlighter, and I committed to memory and understanding the material necessary to pass the exam. And you can too. So I did it in one day. It's kind of like cramming. And does it work? Well, it did for me. Others spent months, reading, studying, reading. They went to, study groups and that kind of thing. USA Prepares, the meetup, had a study group. I did not participate in it because I didn't have the time to go weekend after weekend after weekend and study with other people when I could just study by myself. And I suggest that Gordon West wrote the book. Gordon West, take a look. You can pick up his books directly from his website, or you can get them on eBay, maybe used. So I got mine right from him. And I just sat for the exam, passed the exam, and that was it. Now, I'm not bragging. I'm just telling you can do it too, if you want to. But it will take at least, I guess, in my opinion, at least a day to fully understand the material. Because you will learn it's kind of a hobby also, but you'll learn one of the few things that you can actually do in electronics today. It used to be that you could buy electronic kits. You could buy from Dynaco, D-Y-N-A-C-O, an amplifier, bunch of different amplifiers, preamplifiers, radio tuners, AM, FM speakers, and you could build these kits yourself. And there used to be electronic circuits with tubes and transistors. You could build them yourself. Now that hobby is just pretty much all but gone. I don't know of any stereo kits that you can build. I don't even know anybody who's interested in stereo anymore. But back in the 70s, it was a pretty big deal. Well, ham radio is something that you can do. You can tune your antennas. You can learn the antenna theory, antenna formulas. You can experiment with different kinds of antennas that you can make yourself. You don't have to buy an antenna. You can make it yourself, and it will probably be as good or maybe even better than one you can buy based on the purposes that you have, whether you want to build a sloping antenna, a horizontal antenna, a long wire antenna. I mean, all different ways of looking at it. And if you get yourself a ham rig, that's also a shortwave radio. A ham radio is a shortwave radio. So,
that was going to be my next question.
Yeah. You can look into it. So, my thought is that when the grid goes down, there's no question of if in my world, it's when. I'm just going to key up that transmitter, and I'm going to be, instead of, I could hop on a dirt bike and look around, or I can key the microphone from the comfort of wherever I am and see what's happening far and wide. And you may want to consider that as well, class. Guineith and I will be right back after bottom of the hour commercials. Back in the 1960s, CB radio, also known as Citizens Band radio, was quite the thing. And I saved up money from cutting lawns and so forth, and bought a CB radio, a used one. It was an HB 222 model from Lafayette Radio and Electronics, and they've gone out of business a long time ago. And it was kind of a neat radio. It was 5-watt input, 4-watt output, and I put an antenna on the roof. I climbed up there and mounted an antenna on the roof, a quarter wave antenna. And typically CB radio goes 1 to 5 miles. Well, I was able to go about 25 miles, but that's because I had an antenna on the roof, and ultimately I put a 5/8 wavelength antenna on the roof and tuned it. And so it worked pretty well, but it's fallen out of favor, Citizens Band radio. And I was wondering, Guineith, have you heard people talk about Citizens Band radio? Does anybody use it? I mean, hasn't it been displaced by the cell phone? Did we lose Guineith? I don't know where Guineith is. I'm looking at the meters. No, I don't see Guineith. Hey, Guineith, are you there? I don't know what happened to Guineith, but in any event, Citizens...
how's that? Can you hear me now?
I can. Did you hear what I said about Citizens Band radio?
I heard what you said. I just accidentally hit the mute button.
Okay.
Sorry. That's okay. I figured out how to unmute it now.
Okay.
But anyway, truck drivers around here still use CDs, and people on sheep ranches, who have sheep ranches still use CDs for communication on their properties. Simply because the cell signal around here is so pathetic.
Mm-hmm.
It's just absolutely awful. Mobile phones, unless generally a few little places on the property where the cell signal will work, and with experience you find out where they are,
Mm-hmm.
and that's where you go when you need to make a cell phone call. But, most people who have, if I was going to, which I actually might, set up a, radio system here, I would probably use CB.
Mm-hmm.
Because it doesn't require a registration.
Yeah, and actually, no, it doesn't. At least in the United States, it doesn't. And I had a CB license. When I was very young, I actually thought that, well, you need to do that, so I had one. But it's since expired, decades and decades and decades ago. But now, and for years, actually for decades, you don't need to have a license or permit from the government in order to operate Citizens Band Radio. And so I went to eBay during the break, and you can buy a CB radio for $50 used. I don't think there's a lot of effort being put into making, the newest and best CB radio. I think it's fallen out of favor. Yeah, there are some companies that do, but a lot of what's on eBay is used vintage equipment from the 60s and the 70s, maybe even the 80s. But yeah, it's a great way for truckers to communicate about what's happening. But, cell phone applications have displaced that as well. If you want to know where the police are, there are apps that track where the police are, and they're pretty accurate. But I don't travel with a cell phone, and I'm able to do it. I'm able to believe it or not, I can travel without a cell phone. There's no law requiring it yet. But I think CB might be something to think about. Should there be a calamity and you want to know what's happening, just you could switch to any of the 40 channels on the radio and just listen and see what others are saying. And I think a minimum investment of $25 to $50 will get you up and running. You will need an antenna though, unless you use an indoor antenna. But
I've got another question to ask.
Yeah.
What about short-range FM stations for a purpose of communicating?
Well, I have one.
Although that is one way.
I have one.
Only thing.
I have one.
Yeah.
I have a radio.
Stations or whatever.
Yeah. I have a radio. It's a commercial broadcast transmitter. It's FM. And there was a time when I thought, we'll just rebroadcast USA Prepares in our village. Just maybe take the signal from GCN and play it. Maybe Republic Broadcasting and play it, or maybe a mix of the two. And so I talked to people in the area, farmers, and I said the following. So y'all listen to the radio? No. Would you listen to the radio if there was something to listen to? No. Okay. So that told me, forget it. So I never hooked it up. I never hooked up my commercial 10-watt college radio station style transmitter. I mean, this is a commercial rig. This isn't one of those, Chinese rigs. It was made by Radio Corporation of America. It's top of the line. I bought it used very inexpensively, and I was thinking that maybe I should do that. Then I was thinking, you know what? Maybe what I should do is when I'm out on the farm and I want to listen to the radio, since there's nothing to listen to that's worth listening to, I'll just hook it up to, I'll just hook it up to GCN and RBN and broadcast for my own purposes, bring the power way down. And I've got a radio in my tractor, an AM and an FM radio in the cab tractor, and I can listen to what's happening that way by retransmitting. And I haven't done that. So I might do that, but I don't know. But the answer, I believe, the inexpensive way to do it, if you want to find out what's going on, is Citizens Band Radio. And you don't even have to have a base station. You can get one for, a mobile one that you'd have in a car. It's got a speaker, it's got a microphone, it's got an antenna connection, and it runs on 12 volts. So if the grid's down, that's what you're going to want. You're going to want a 12-volt system. And you do have a car battery already in your car. So all you need is some battery clamps, some wire, and run your. Literally, what you could do is you could put 2 battery clamps on cut the ends off a 50-foot extension cord, put a couple battery clamps on the black and the white wire in the extension cord, the orange extension cord, run into the house, cut the other end off, and attach that to the 12-volt terminals of your CB radio. Hook up an antenna, and you're good to go. It's as simple as that. And you can listen to Grid Down in the comfort of your home and try to figure out what's going on. And I think that might be the safest way to do it before venturing out, because I think venturing out might be dangerous.
I
Guineith,
agree with you there.
In your world, in Australia, you're talking about going out on a horse or going out on foot, right?
Yeah. Or a bicycle.
Or bicycle. Okay.
Yeah.
My preference would probably be a horse. And I'd want to make sure that horse had a turbocharger. so that if we had to get into passing mode, we could get out of there quickly, wherever there is.
Well, I'll tell you what. I'm in the process of looking at getting. This is the other topic actually that I wanted to talk about today, was horses, because I'm in the process of looking at getting another horse. My previous horse had an accident and had to be put down. Probably about 6 months ago, and I'm thinking that my next horse is going to be probably a Brumby. Now, a Brumby is like an Australian version of a Mustang, okay? So they are the horses that just live out in the forest, and they live all over Australia, right from the tip of the Northern Territory all the way down to Tasmania and east to west and all over the place. Practically, there's no part of the country in outback Australia where Brumbies cannot be found. And they are tough. And they live on the vegetation that grows there. So you don't need a whole bunch of fancy food for them. They generally don't need shoes because their ancestors for the last couple of 100 years have been living in the Australian outback, and the horses with weak hooves simply did not survive. The horses with weak minds simply did not survive, and the horses with highly refined guts, intestines, simply did not survive. So you've got a very tough, very hardy, very clever breed of horse there, and they are eminently tameable. But when you are getting into taming them, and this applies to Mustangs as well, for your American audience, you can't treat a Mustang like you would treat any other horse, okay? They are cleverer. They have more of a survival instinct, which means that you can't just, you can't be a novice rider and get on a Mustang and think that everything's going to be okay. Does that make sense, Vincent?
Yeah, and when I mentioned a turbocharged horse, isn't a Mustang a turbocharged horse?
Absolutely. Mm-hmm. They're fast. Mm-hmm. And Brumbies are fast. Mm-hmm. And we've got a poem here in Australia about it. It's called The Man from Snowy River, and it actually got made into a Hollywood movie a number of years ago, and it starred, of all people, Sam O'Neill, and it starred, oh gosh, what's the name of that woman? Oh gosh, I forget her name, but anyway, a whole lot of big stars that have since gone on to become big stars, but this was at the beginning of their film career. And the whole thing of The Man from Snowy River is that they're all getting together to have a roundup at a station, which is what we call a ranch here in this country, because there's a horse that has escaped and has joined a wild mob of horses, a mob of brumbies, and this horse was the son of a famous racehorse, and he was worth £1,000, which back in the day when people were getting like, £3 a week to live on, that was a lot of money. And the one who ends up saving the day is the country race kid riding a brumby, because he's the only one who ends up being willing to ride his horse down a mountainside to get a hold of this colt.
Yeah, we'll be right back. Guineith Isaacs is with us, and if you'd like to find her, you can type in her name, Guineith, Guineith, last name Isaacs, Isaacs. You can find her on the internet, and you can communicate with her on Facebook, should you have Facebook and choose to do so. Guineith, I have a feeling that those who think they run the show, I'm not talking about GCN running this particular broadcast, or Republic Broadcasting Network, or the Ron Gibson channel, but those who think they run the show, meaning the world, I have a feeling they don't want us to communicate with each other should there be a calamity, an emergency, a catastrophe, grid down situation. I think they'd like us to be in the dark. And if you don't want to be in the dark, you might want to consider getting a communications radio and learn how to use it. Don't just buy one and say everything's good. I'll hook it up when I need to. You need to hook it up before you need to, so you can learn how it works and learn the theory, because the antenna is a big deal. It doesn't have to be expensive, but it's a big deal getting it right. And so you need to know how to do that. Any comments about that, Guineith?
Yeah, I would tend to agree. I haven't got a CB here, but it's definitely on my shopping list. But this goes with all preps. You need to get them now. You need to install them now, and you need to start living this as a lifestyle. Because at the moment, we can, you had your homework that you set with people. You need to turn the lights off and just see how everything goes. Well, I was actually on my roof listening to listening to the broadcast, working on my solar panels as you were saying that, and I chuckled to myself, and I said to myself, well, that's not a problem for us because that happens every night anyway. At a certain hour of the night, the lights go out, and that's sort of an indication that it might be soon time to go to bed. And, that's just normal life. We have a smaller solar power system than you have. And then when the sun comes up in the morning, we don't have a generator. The electricity comes back on, and there we go. And then we can do things like pumping water using washing machines. The internet comes on so I can email people. But that's how it is around here. And with regards to food, when we go into town, I can only go into town once every 2 weeks because it costs money for me to go into town. I don't have a car, which means I have to get somebody to help me with transport, and I have to get on the bus, and it's a big expedition, and it lasts all day. And by the time I get home, I'm generally absolutely exhausted, and I might even be exhausted into the next day. When we go in, I generally get as much food as I can, and I often get a friend to help me to transport that food and myself home. So this is how we live. And, you know, it's something where we can go. Generally, I like to have between 2 and 4 weeks of food in the house at any one time. And because we're just coming out of a time where, you know, we had a bit of poverty hit around here. We had to go into our food stores. The food stores went low. So at the moment, I think it's around about 3 weeks that we have. But even if we had longer than a month's supply of food, I would like that. I like to have as much food in the house as I possibly can. Does that make sense, Vincent?
I don't know how to say this, Gwyneth, so I'm just going to apologize first and tell you that I don't mean this to be sexist in any way, shape, or form. But I'd like our class to understand, Guineith is a lady. She's on the roof. She's designing and engineering her solar system by herself. Guineith is highly educated. She's a scientist, but she's doing this by herself. And she lives a lifestyle that is extremely difficult. But here in America, if the electricity goes down for 20 minutes, people are melting down. I think you ought to take a page out of Guineith's book and say, you know what? I can do it too. It's not easy. It's hard. It's heavy. It's tiring. It's laborious. But you know what? I can do it too. I think that's the salient point in today's class. You can do it too. And Guineith, aren't you in your 40s?
Yep. I'm going to be 45 soon.
Huh? And she'll ride a horse into town. Or a bicycle.
I'm not in perfect health. I have to look after myself.
Very good. Guineith, I'll see you next week.